I am chilling at Base Boston right now in the barracks because my cutter's in dockside. Hopefully we're finished on Friday, so that would be amazing. So I'm going to do small unit training tonight. I'm not going to get too much in the weeds. We'll just kind of go over the references, talk about some of the program highlights and some things that you should look out for the board. And I'll throw some questions out there that I've seen and that I've asked on the mock boards, and some that I've seen from others. If you have any questions, put them on there. Hey, Carson. Oh, good, Nick. If you have questions, put them on the board there, or you can hit me up offline. But we'll talk about that again in just a little bit. I'm on my phone, so there might be a little bit of a lag, and I apologize for that. But I think this will be some good content for you. So, small unit training programs for afloat and ashore. My first comment is straight out of Coast Guard Regs, Manual 5000.3, Chapter 4. Officer in charge, commanding officer, responsibility for command is absolute, and that covers the responsibility for safety, efficiency, and the well-being of your crew and your unit, as well as the command, and that can't be delegated, right? So under that, obviously, is training, monitoring seamanship, proficiency, and training for all the assigned boat crew members, and ensure that personnel assigned to operational duties meet all appropriate recurrent training requirements. That also includes your reservists if you have a reserve program at your unit, so don't forget about them. So our objective is to just kind of know the references that we're using to prepare for this section. OIC CO responsibilities, obviously, for afloat and ashore, and then I'll ask you or throw out some questions. You don't have to answer the questions, but maybe generate some conversation and some dialogue. Your cutter training qualification manual, it's a big one. Boat volume 1, 2, and 3. 751, Office of Cutter Forces on the portal. Like, that's your bread and butter. It's my bread and butter for the cutter. It should be yours. You should be intimately familiar with it. As well as the Boat Forces portal page, intimately familiar with it. All your stand stuff is on there. All your cutter drills are on 751. The tray 1 is on 751. You should be super familiar with that. And then the 3502. Again, that's your bread and butter right there. And you should already be familiar with that. If you're an E6 or an E7 at a station doing the TPO stuff, or you should have already done it, you should be really familiar with that stuff. I would also say that going to Boat Forces and being familiar with the Boat Force High Bosun, being familiar with the Boat Forces policy letters and how they're used and what the intent is for them. And then, of course, your boat crew handbooks. All that should be part of your study packet of information for you, and your references as you prepare for this. All right, so OIC requirements, you're responsible to carry out an active training program, so it's your program. Hi, Patrick Holm. Ensure direct access and TMT are utilized to capture and track training. Who can certify somebody in TMT? Who's the final certifier in TMT? It's your duty as an officer in charge to provide appropriate level guidance and support. So if you think there's training deficiencies, you need to figure out a plan to ensure bosun, to ensure that training is being met and where the lack of training is. Again, go back to the Boat Forces page, use your stand team, use 751 to kind of help fill the gap. You're also going to approve monthly training plans, ensure compliance with Coast Guard IDP. It's our favorite, as well as a slew of other things. But just be intimately familiar with what is required of you as the officer in charge. Know the different types of training boards. Who's going to be on your unit training board, what you're required to, who you're required to sign, and how the difference is between a cutter and your small boat unit. What classes of cutter are not required to have a training board, and how will that impact your unit? Is that the best idea? Ensure you have a unit training instruction. As you know, you got to designate somebody by position and title. There was a boat force policy letter that came out about who the OIC shall designate for your qualification examining board, and there's 4 parts that if I'm on your board, that's what I'm asking you. So go look up that policy letter. It's 04 TAC 17, and you can look that up for yourself. Onboard training team members for your cutter. What does that look like? How do you get there? Who's going to be your onboard training team? And what do they need to do to get to that position? If you're on a PB or a WITL, you know you have to do the WQS system. And those are building blocks, so you got to start at the very bottom and work your way to the top. So know that process. Know about your INDOC program. And again, who's your final approval authority? And how is that identified for you? Some of the elements to unit training is going to be formal school requirements. Where can you find that? What's the MTL? GMT, of course, department divisional training. I think WQS is the biggest. As you know, there's no crosswalk anymore. You actually have to do the WQS program for certain cutter types. And then you might still have JQR depending on what type of unit you're at. And how is that being tracked? Professional development, taking advantage of those opportunities and getting your folks to where they can get that professional development. What's going to make your unit better? What's going to make the person excited to be there and want to do their job, and giving them an opportunity to really excel at that by looking for those professional development opportunities. And then interim qualification, understand the different types of interim qualifications, who can authorize that, and what's the maximum amount of time you can authorize that. Why would you authorize it? There are limited circumstances in which you could. So just kind of know that, and what the policy says, and then how you, as the OIC, are going to implement that, and then what impact that might have in your unit. Remember that there's only 10 to 12 minutes per board member to ask you questions, so they're not going to get in the weeds on you, but there's some key things that you should know. I would also throw out there that if you're the pursuit coxswain at your unit currently, you should know the steps that it takes to get to pursuit coxswain. If you're a surfman, you should know the requirements, the currency requirements to get to that surfman qualification. Also, if you're a training petty officer at your unit currently and you go to the board, you should know what your job entails and the different aspects of it. That's your day-to-day and your bread and butter, so you should know that. Don't forget about the reserve program. Know what a SARA is. How should you be using them at your unit? What help is there for them? You're responsible for the reserve program, so you should be helping them with the resources and tools so they can be self-sufficient at your unit, or getting them an opportunity to get to where they need to get to, right? Know what RFS is, ready for C, know what a shakedown is, kind of know those different things, and those, I think someone's doing inspections later, so it might come up again for that, but just kind of be aware. Anything on, Nick, I didn't write anything down on AUX, but if you want to talk about it offline, we can, but I did not prepare anything or get in the books on it. But yeah, if you have an auxiliary component at your unit, you need to figure out what they need to do to be qualified and to be working with your unit. So I haven't been with AUX in a while, so I can't speak to that. But Nick, if you have anything to offer on the AUX program and their boat crew stuff, then throw it out there. Or hit me up later and I'll look it up. Thanks for the homework. Man, I didn't even think about that. Sorry. So reserve, back to the reserve thing. What's their qualification timeline? Because it's different than active duty. What should they get trained on, of course, and what do their boards look like? We talked about board membership. Used to be it was automatically going to be your XO, XPO, but that's slightly changed with the Boat Forces policy letter, so just make sure you review that if you don't know that already. That came out in 2017, so I'm sure it's updated in the manual, but just remember that. What happens when you have a currency lapse? What's the restart process? What's the restart process for you if you're going from a unit that you're already qualified and you're transferring to your new unit as the OIC? What's the restart process for you on a 47? Thanks, Nick. So just remember they're a little bit different, right? But the bare minimum for restart process: AOR, FAM, PT, TCT, board check ride. But it's slightly different for OIC. Review policies. If you're in D9, and while I haven't been to D9, but you might be asked about ice rescue training, possibly, maybe some of the key components of it. So just be familiar with those, especially if you're already at a unit that does something particular to their AOR. You should be well versed in it, right? Hello, Dan. Glad you're here. So I always think about board questions in 3 parts. So what's the policy? What's the black and white? Hey, what's the black and white say? You need to know the policy, right? You also need to know how you are going to implement that, and then you want to know what the impact is to the unit. So the board's there to kind of evaluate your maturity, judgment, and your knowledge of Coast Guard policy, but they want to know how Nick or Dan is going to implement that if they give them the keys to their own unit or their own cutter. So for me, I broke it down into 3 parts, and that was know the policy, how am I going to apply it, and how is that going to impact your unit? What is the outcome of that at your unit? Do you guys have any questions so far? Make sure you get into the books on the LE side of the house too. Pursuit, TAC, your BO, your BTM requirements, who's going to make up your law enforcement instruction team. Oh, that's interesting, Bosun. So do you keep up paper, do you track them on paper? I can't read the whole message because it's on my phone. Another question, what's your certification process to get to TAC Coxswain? Oh, roger that, Bosun. Thank you for that. Who's going to sit on your boards of your unit? Understanding that, because you might be asked what your board makeup look like on your WYTL. Who shall be designated as your qualification examining board chairman? Like I said before, that's a policy letter. That was an update. 04 TAC 17 tells you who you shall, or what the requirements are. Who can revoke a certification? How's that documented? Oh, look, Bosun's giving the folks in D9 a board question. There you go. There's a freebie. What does it look like for you if you're granting an interim at your station? You got 45s and you just got a 29. What does that interim letter look like? What instance would you use that? What's LRI? Hey, Rob. I don't know if I mentioned this already because this is now towards the end of my list. What are the requirements? Oh, yeah. Okay. That's outside of my realm. Gotcha. And so that might be something as simple as routing a memo through you to the sector, right, for an aux lapse in currency. And I think that's what Bosun was saying up top. Your onboard training team, there's a process now as of June of this summer on how they get to that point and what the requirements are. So know the steps to your onboard training team. If you're flying through questions, the board tends to ask you more. So just be mindful of that. Like I said, they only ask 10 to 12 questions, but they probably have 15 to 30 questions ready to ask you. Currency requirements for heavy weather training. How are you going to act? Are you going to do live man overboard drills? And what's the information provided for you in the policy letter regarding PIW training? Yep, absolutely, Carson. That's a good question. I think I have that on here too. What's the difference between qualification and certification would be like an easy question for you. What happens if you don't complete currency training in AOPS TMT? What's the timeline for that? What's the deferral process for heavy weather tasks? Drill modes. Yeah, actually, good point. Sorry. So Tray 01 for cutters, you should be familiar with that. Tray 01, what are some critical items on your drill sheets? The drill modes and passing scores. So if you're doing Becky's for Stan, you're going to have critical items that you're going to have to complete, and if you don't complete them, you're going to automatically fail. Same goes for your cutter drill sheets, which I did not bring up here. But there's some things on there that are going to be critical items, and you should be aware of that. One bolt not completed and you're going to fail the drill. So those are some things. I think that's a little bit in the weeds, but if you're only sitting for one mission set, then the board members have extra time to ask you questions. So just throwing that out there. Be ready to talk. I've heard some board members ask about how important training is to them, and how do you define a good training program at a unit. Be able to talk about that. Oh, and then the different drill modes. So if you're doing cutter drills and there's training, evaluation, or walkthrough mode, what's the passing score that can be entered, and what mode can it be in for you to enter it into TMT? Yep, good point. Thanks, Nicholas. Critical items on the cutter drills are all safety related, absolutely. So if you're not being safe, you're done. If you do your Trade Team 01 and don't identify safety concerns or issues, if you're not doing GAR 2.0, like all those things that we are supposed to be doing, if you're not doing that, you're graded on it. So you're doing it wrong, if you will. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but there's like a party going on next door. I'm going to give it another minute and see if you guys have questions, comments. You want to talk about anything else? The training programs are pretty straightforward because it's all policy. And you should all be familiar with it. Have I left anything out for anybody? One more minute. They're singing next door now. I'm concerned. It might be karaoke. Ooh, what Navy PQS are still used? Good question. Do you have the answer? Hi, Master Chief. Good luck on your move. Alright, I'm going to wrap this up. And I'll look at this in a second. So, know your requirements. Know where your references are for those requirements. Obviously, Coast Guard regulations, Cutter Training Qualification Manual, Boat 1, 2, and 3. Nice. The WQS program, be intimately familiar with both the portal sites for boat forces, 751, the afloat training website portal page, and the boat forces and cutter, Office of Cutter Forces. I'm saying that wrong, but you get what I'm saying. Know your responsibilities with program admin, your training board, training chair, those requirements, your currency requirements, and then different elements of your training program. And I think that's it. I am happy to talk offline about any of this, and then I guess this video is going to be forever on the internet now, so that's super exciting. But I'm happy to throw some more stuff at you, some scenarios offline, if you'd like. Thank you again to Nick McGowan for making this still happen this year or this season, and good luck to everybody else who's going to sit on the fall boards. I'm excited for you. Yeah, if you have questions, it doesn't have to be about training. We can talk about anything. You guys can hit me up on Messenger if I'm on, or Messenger on Facebook or whatever, but I'm happy to spend time talking about any of the board stuff. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, so have a good night. I don't see any more questions. You're welcome, Nick Gursey. Stay out of trouble down there. Thanks, Bosun. Bye. I'm going to say goodnight now. Bye.